So I grew up in a home with a perpetrator of domestic violence, and in our household that abuse was mostly emotional abuse rather than just physical abuse. So as a young person, it was really hard to make sense of what we were actually experiencing, or to give words to what we were experiencing, because in that time, in the kind of late 1990s, early 2000s, you only ever heard about domestic violence when it was spoken of with, bruises and physical abuse. So for us, there was a lot of verbal abuse, a lot of emotional abuse, and that was, in our household, my father was the perpetrator of that abuse. And it had a huge impact on me as a young person in many different ways, and some of those ways that still impact me today. The emotional abuse had such a huge impact on me as a young person, and at the time, it impacted me in so many ways. I had really severe depression, really severe anxiety, a lot of self-esteem issues, and one of the biggest ones that I experienced, which I still experience today, is body dysmorphia. So I remember there's one particular experience that I remember the most from growing up, and that was being about 11 or 12 years old. And I remember it was like a hot day. I'd just been for a swim in the pool. So I was sitting on our old black leather couch in my swimmers, and I was eating one of those, chocolate covered Bulla ice creams. And my dad walked past and just kind of looked at me and went, "Oh, wow, look at your fat rolls." And just pointed it out and kind of laughed about it. And I don't know what he meant, whether he meant to be intentionally cruel by saying that, but as a young person who was just going through puberty, that stuck with me. And, from that time on, I had quite disordered eating, body dysmorphia, that, moved into things like me just hating everything about myself. So I would try to go whole days without even speaking because I hated the sound of my voice, I hated the way I looked, and I never felt comfortable in my own body. And that's something that I still struggle with today. So the things that I experienced when I was younger have definitely impacted my parenting style. There are certain words that I'm kind of hyper aware of not using with our son. Even like if he was to do something that was, a bit silly, not a good decision, I might say, "Hey, that was a really dumb decision," or maybe that was a stupid decision, but I'll never say, "You're stupid" or "You're dumb." And those are things that I really try really hard to be aware of and to never cross that line. Because I know for me growing up, being told by my dad, "You're fat, you're stupid, I hate you, you should get sent away to a girls' home," like all these really horrible things, I know how hopeless that made me feel as a young person. I think from my own experiences, obviously I knew that once I had a child, I didn't want to continue that cycle. But I think there's a difference between experiencing, what we experience as emotional abuse survivors, and when you become a parent and you actually see this little child before you, because then you realize just how vulnerable kids are. And it kind of reminded me how vulnerable I was as a young person. So the things that we say, sometimes, we don't even realize how crushing that can be to a kid, or how much they might take it to heart. And so, in my parenting style, I just try to be aware of not saying things that, are going to exacerbate insecurities that my son has, and definitely making sure that I'm not doing anything that makes him feel like his feelings are being minimized or that he's being mocked, because that was, a big part of my childhood. So when I was growing up, everybody used to use this same phrase, and I would hear it from people at school, from my parents, and they'd say, "Sticks and stones may break my bones, but words will never hurt me." And so people would just say, "You've got to get tougher, you've got to not be so sensitive." And I really would love society to just do away with this concept that we just need to be tougher than the things that people say, because words are powerful. And our words can be powerfully uplifting, or they can be powerfully destructive. And it's really important that we choose wisely what we do with our words, because the impact for people like myself, it can be lifelong. So we really need to understand that emotional abuse is just that, it is a form of abuse.